Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing the state of the planet, specifically in regards to climate change and general destruction of our ecosystem, leading to destruction of ourselves. As I've said before, and I'll say again, it doesn't give me pleasure to bring you this news. It's not, it's not something that I really want to focus my attention on. The problem is that nobody in the mainstream world of news and happenings and what is important to recognize as news, nobody's really paying attention to the dire circumstances that we are in as to the destruction of our planet. And we really start needing to find new ways to live if we are going to continue living. There's not a lot of hope for us doing anything different. There's not a lot of hope for us doing anything different in the time span that we have left. The chances of us turning anything around are, pretty close to zero. But with that being said, I think the honorable, responsible thing to do is to act as if we have a chance to do the right thing in the face of certain doom. Is the highest that we can aspire to. I was thinking about what a political movement might look like, or what a political platform might look like that would actually take us out of this paradigm and maybe into a new paradigm. I don't know. I came up with, I'm sure this is not a new phrase, but eco-collectivism. What would that look like? What would political solutions look like? What, what if you had a political party and you had a website like the Green Party and you're like, what is your platform? I started thinking about this today. And I got into it a little bit. I need to kind of write things down and maybe solidify what my thoughts are about this. Our good friend Valhalla is often talking about the Zeitgeist movement. And some of you might be familiar with Zeitgeist, some of you may not. What I am going to do is actually read the Zeitgeist movement mission statement from the website, zeitgeistmovement.com. Just doing this to put out thoughts and vibrations and intentions into the world, into the universe. And to read this for those of you who may not know what this is about, this may be eye-opening. So our mission statement, founded in 2008, the Zeitgeist movement is a sustainability advocacy organization which conducts community-based activism and awareness actions through a network of global regional chapters, project teams, annual events, media, and charity work. The movement's principal focus includes the recognition that the majority of the social problems which plague the human species at this time are not the sole result of some institutional corruption, scarcity, a political policy, a flaw of human nature, or other commonly held assumptions of causality in the activist community. Rather, the movement recognizes that issues such as poverty, corruption, collapse, homelessness, war, starvation, and the like appear to be symptoms born out of an outdated social structure. While intermediate reform steps and temporal community support are of interest to the movement, the defining goal here is the installation of a new socioeconomic model based upon technically responsible resource management, allocation, and distribution through what could be considered the scientific method of reasoning problems and finding optimized solutions. This resource-based economic model is about taking a direct technical approach to social management as opposed to a monetary or even political one. It is about updating the workings of society to the most advanced and proven methods science has to offer, leaving behind the damaging consequences and limiting inhibitions which are generated by our current system of monetary exchange, profits, corporations, and other structural and motivational components. The movement is loyal to a train of thought, not figures or institutions. In other words, the view held is that through the use of socially targeted research and testing understandings in science and technology, we are now able to logically arrive at societal applications which could be profoundly more effective in meeting the needs of the human population. In fact, so much so that there is little reason to assume war, poverty, 95% of most crime, and many other money-based scarcity effects common in our current model cannot be resolved over time. The range of the movement's activism and awareness campaigns extend from a short to long term. From short to long term, the long-term view, which is the transition into a resource-based economic model, is a constant pursuit and expression as stated before. However, in the path to get there, the movement also recognizes the need for transitional reform techniques along with direct community support. For instance, while monetary reform itself is not an end solution proposed by the movement, the merit of such legislative approaches are still considered valid in the context of transition and temporal integrity. Likewise, while food and clothes drives and other supportive projects to help those in need today is also not considered a long-term solution, it is also still also considered valid in the context of helping others in a time of need, while also drawing awareness to the principal goal. The Zeitgeist movement also has no allegiance to a country or traditional political platforms. It views the world as a single system and the human species as a single family, and recognizes that all countries must disarm and learn to share resources and ideas if we expect to survive in the long run. Hence, the solutions arrived at and promoted are in the interest to help everyone on the planet Earth, not a select group. Hear, hear, Zeitgeist movement. I'm going to link this below if you all want to check this out. I know of the Zeitgeist movement. I've heard about the Zeitgeist movement. I don't personally run into people practicing the Zeitgeist movement or in the club or, going to Zeitgeist meetings or whatever. So I don't know personally anyone involved in this or where to even find like-minded folks in that movement. I'm sure there are, places on the internet to find that information. When I Google eco-collective or collectivism, I just get a lot of, Facebook pages, groups, a website, Eco-Collective Seattle. It's a woman-owned company. It's a .com. Eco-Collective Australia. So it looks like basically Eco-Collective, the name is being used for businesses at the moment. But I don't know. I welcome maybe some ideas about what would actually define eco-collectivism or an eco-collective movement or campaign. I just had some very basic kind of outlines, thoughts like, what would be the first thing to do if you were going to shift our society to a much more sustainable model, like something, if we were going to shift out of this paradigm, how would we do that? And the first thing that came to mind would be to have maybe green areas or communities outside of large cities that would be like off limits to technology, right? So you would maybe offer people homes or places to stay or just some land, like here, come live in this green community. This is a government program. Come live in this green community. We're going to aid you in setting up your own food production and becoming self-sustaining in any way, every way, in all ways, making your own clothes, growing your own food, building your own houses, et cetera, et cetera. But the main tenet of this green community, of this green area, would be that, technology would just not be a part of the equation. And how would, what would you define to be, what's the cutoff for technology? Possibly any technology that uses fossil fuels. I don't know. There's obviously lots to define in this. This is just a rough sketch in my brain that I came up with. And then the second thing to do would be to create wildlife areas that are basically, so, you have national parks or national forests. I would create national parks or forests that are off limits to humans. No humans, no building, no roads, no sightseeing, no climbing, no camping, no nothing. Like, and it would be optimal to set these up large areas and be able to expand them, if you could. Obviously, you can't shut down industrial society right away, because we obviously, that creates huge problems, all kinds of problems, and we'd have to find a way to take care of the nuclear plants. So we need industrial society to keep going for a little while, so we figure out how to shut down the nuclear plants, how to deal with the global dimming problem, how to either sequester carbon, and by sequester I don't mean carbon capture, I mean by just planting some plants, planting some trees. What else? Yeah, I mean, that would just be like a basic main thrust. You'd have to keep industrial society going and slowly shift people over to this new way of living. You'd have to figure out which technologies are acceptable, which are not. There'd have to be all kinds of decision-making process, decisions made in this process. And you'd have to figure out how to wind down civilization so that we don't just go over the falls. This is all just a mental exercise. I understand. Please don't comment below like, get off the hopium, or stop shooting the hopium, or stop smoking the hopium, or, there's no way out. There's no way for us to, I understand all that. I get it. I get all the science. I'm just saying, if, just walk down this road, the road of if with me. If we were going to switch over, if we were going to change over, if we were going to change how we were going to do this, how we were going to live our lives or go forward as a species, how would that look? What would the actual steps be? What would a political movement look like? What would political decisions look like? Et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, just a game I'm playing in my mind. Don't mind me. You know, at the very basic crux of everything is that we have to reshape what opportunity looks like in the future. All opportunity is going to have to be shared, as in what shapes our future isn't economic well-being for an individual or a few individuals, but what makes our community and our planet stronger in the long run. The health of our biosphere must be the priority. In doing that, we must welcome all into our shared cause. We must look past our superficial differences and work together. We must stop creating division and create opportunities for cooperation and growth. We must be able to hear each other, but mainly we must be ready to hear the truth as it exists outside of ourselves. We must be ready to love and be taught how to love by each other and Mother Earth. Just a place to start. I don't know. Possibly a place to start. On to some ecological news. I was talking about migration, exodus in the last video. Exodus is happening and it's going to happen. Might possibly be better to, go ahead and take the initiative before you are forced. And I understand that I'm speaking as somebody who lives in one of the largest cities in this country, and my own logic tells me that it's not good to stay here. However, there are forces that are keeping me from leaving. So therefore I'm staying with all the knowledge that doing so is a dangerous proposition. So be it. I'm staying until it looks like the very last moment before actually something does happen, and then scram. Sam. This is from the Washington Post. Exodus from Puerto Rico grows as island struggles to rebound from Hurricane Maria. San Juan, Puerto Rico, there have been three muses in Ramoncito El Andino Rodriguez's life, love, lament, and La Isla, Puerto Rico. The founder of one of the oldest musical acts here, Rodriguez croons boleros and lyrical anthems that at times quicken the heart and at others create a daydreamy lull. Many of them are homages to his motherland, love songs to this Caribbean island. It was a place he never wanted to leave, but leave he did. Rodriguez reluctantly abandoned Puerto Rico after several feet of floodwater spilled into his home during Hurricane Maria in September, destroying his instruments, albums, and handwritten compositions. The 78-year-old joined hundreds of thousands of other islanders who boarded flights in the past 5 months, creating a growing diaspora that as time passes, is increasingly unlikely to return. Rodriguez and his wife, like so many others, picked Florida, and their stateside sojourn was supposed to be temporary. They didn't expect stability back home to be so elusive for so long. I'm still here, Rodriguez said, with a sigh from his niece's house in Homestead, Florida, in mid-February. If the past decade of Puerto Rican history is any indication, his stay could become permanent. Destiny will decide what happens next. Excuse me. Even before Maria strafed the region, a record number of Puerto Ricans were realizing that the declining island might be where their heart is, but cannot be where their feet stay. Nearly 500,000 people left Puerto Rico for the mainland during the past decade, according to the Pew Research Center, pushing the stateside Puerto Rican population past the number living on the island last year, an estimated 3.3 million. The government of Puerto Rico's guess is that By the end of 2018, 200,000 more residents will have left the U.S. territory for good, moving to places such as Florida, New York, Texas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New England. It would mean another drop of more than 5% in the island's population. Experts say the storm and its widespread devastation undoubtedly have sped up the pace of migration as residents have dealt with extended power outages, communication lapses, infrastructure failures, and in some cases, isolation. What already was the largest exodus in the island's history now includes people fleeing in droves simply to achieve some sense of normalcy. Just this week, a power outage put nearly 900,000 residents in and around the capital city of San Juan in the dark and without water. Without water again, tens of thousands in Puerto Rico have had no electricity since the hurricane struck 5 months ago. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers estimates that 1 in 10 customers still won't have it at the end of March. The island's bankrupt public utility has struggled to restore power, and contracting scandals, material shortages, and intermittent blackouts, and the biggest restoration contractor, Fluor Corporation, confirmed that it is pulling out of Puerto Rico in the next several weeks after reaching the funding limit of its $746 million contract. Is this the same company that was like 2 people out of Montana that Trump approved for this? I don't know. I don't know if that's the same one. The governor announced last month to privatize the electric utility, sparking plans last month to privatize the electric utility, sparking standoffs with unionized workers and arousing suspicions from residents. Some municipalities, such as San Sebastian, a town in the island's northwest corner, didn't wait and formed their own volunteer brigade to string up power lines and return electricity to thousands of residents. Go. In this day and age, do not wait for somebody to help you. You've got to do it yourself. Nearly 58,000 homes here have roofs made of blue tarps while they await federal assistance. More than 437,000 residents, about 2 of every 5 who applied so far, have received money from the Federal Emergency Management Agency for home repairs. For many, the future feels ominous. Victor Dominguez set a June deadline for his island. If Puerto Rico doesn't get the lights back on and move the economy, the mortgage banker will take his family elsewhere. I am very attached to my island, and my preference is to stay here, but I have to think what's best for my son, the 39-year-old said. I'm in a moment in which I have to be very observant about what's happening and be flexible. Immediately after the storm, Dominguez sent his family to the States for 2 weeks while he continued working and taking care of their home. When schools in Florida announced that they would take in Puerto Rican students, he and his wife considered enrolling their 10-year-old son. But as long as he had a job on the island, the family decided to work and wait it out. Many of his colleagues and neighbors did not. Combined with this economic crisis, this was a perfect storm for the country to just empty. He said, "There's still a lot of people, but I hear about people who are leaving on a weekly basis. I've spoken to people who have this hope of coming back to Puerto Rico, but I've also heard from people who are happy to have permanent stability." Jose Luis Rodriguez, 53, spends his nights in a wind-damaged wooden home pressed against a steep hillside in Comarillo in central Puerto Rico. The mosquitoes are relentless, but the loneliness is what stings. He lives by himself in a barrio where most of the residents rely on government assistance, and half of the homes are now vacant because of the hurricane. The La Plata River that runs through the town swelled by more than 60 feet, inundating hundreds of homes, including that of Rodriguez's daughter, 24. Having lost everything, she joined her twin sister on the mainland, leaving behind their father, who was struggling. "They are the only thing I have," Rodriguez said. "If I could, I would be there. My daughter said she would come back, but she doesn't have a place to live." I'm not going to read the rest of this article. Super long, but I will link it below. If you want to look at it on one level, people are leaving because they can't live as people live in this current paradigm. But for some what's the word I'm looking for? For some hardy souls who, this is maybe an opportunity for people to live much more simply and without all the modern conveniences of life. I know that people don't want to do that against their will. I know that people who are not ready to do that don't want to be forced to do that. Again, maybe a possibility for some people who understand what's going on as far as climate change and the earth, to find another way, to build another way, to discover another way of life. Who knows? But the guarantee that more and stronger storms will hit Puerto Rico is 100% certain. So that's not good. I'm going to read a couple things from fasterthanexpected.com. Again, sea level rise will rapidly worsen coastal flooding in coming decades, NOAA warns. Excuse me. March 7th, 2018. From Inside Climate News, coastal communities should expect much more frequent flooding in coming decades as sea levels rise. There's a picture here, and I believe it's Miami, of, streets flooded out. It's already happening in Miami. They're already getting king tides a few times a year. Miami is getting flooded out a few times a year from sea level rise. I don't understand. I just don't understand why people aren't like, I'm out of here. I don't understand why people are holding on in Miami. It is not going to get better. It is going to get worse, and things are going to start crumbling. And of course, people are going to leave when they, when it gets really, really bad. The report published by the National Oceanic and coastal communities should expect much more frequent flooding in coming decades as sea levels rise, according to a new federal report. Many places that are dry now could flood every day by the end of the century. Excuse me. The report, published by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, projects the impact of sea level rise on coastal flooding along the nation's shorelines and says it's already having an effect, particularly on the East Coast. In the Southeast, the average number of days with high tide floods has more than doubled since 2000 to 3 per year. Excuse me. While the number in the Northeast has increased by about 75% to 6 per year. We're seeing an accelerated increase up and down most of the Atlantic seaboard, said William V. Sweet, an oceanographer at NOAA and the lead author of the report. It's not a good place to be because impacts are going to become chronic rather quickly. While Miami currently experiences only a few days of high tide flooding per year, for example, it should expect 10 days each year by the early 2030s. 10 days each year by the early 2030s. Under an intermediate scenario for sea level rise, just a decade later, that number could triple and flooding would likely occur every other day by 2060. Short little synopsis of that article. More sea level rise, more of the Bay Area could be underwater in 2100 than previously expected. March 7th, 2018, a new report suggests that sinking land, known as land subsidence, will increase the potential reach and damage of flooding in the Bay Area, submerging a larger portion of the region by the year 2100 than previously estimated. Subsidence can be caused by groundwater pumping, which can act to deflate the ground above it, or the gradual compacting of landfill, when lands are filled in an effort to create solid ground to build upon. The authors of the report, Manucher Scherze, a professor at Arizona State University, and Roland Bergman, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, have combined land elevation data with rising sea level projections, and they are now challenging the current flood threat projections as too conservative. Under the new projections, San Francisco International Airport could see half of its runways submerged by the year 2100. Original estimates that did not include land subsidence were much lower. Other areas around the bay that have been built on engineered landfill, like parts of Foster City and Treasure Island, are particularly vulnerable to the dual impact of subsidence and sea level rise. And one more, two more little short clips of these articles. By 2100, damaged corals may let waves twice as tall as today's reach coasts. March 5th, a complex coral reef full of nooks and crannies is a coastline's best defense against large ocean waves. But coral die-offs over the next century could allow taller waves to penetrate the coral's defenses, simulations suggest. A new study finds that as at some Pacific Island sites, waves reaching the shore could be more than twice as high as today's by 2100. The rough, complex structures of coral reefs dissipate wave energy through friction, calming waves before they reach the shore. As corals die due to warming oceans, the overall complexity of the reef also diminishes, leaving a coast potentially more exposed. At the same time, rising sea levels due to climate change increasingly threaten low-lying coastal communities with inundation and beach erosion. And stressed coral may not be able to grow vertically fast enough to match the pace of sea level rise. That could also make them a less effective barrier. Researchers compared simulations of current and future sea level and reef conditions at 4 sites with differing wave energy near the French Polynesian islands of Moorea and Tahiti. The team then simulated the height of a wave after it has passed the reef, known as the back reef wave height, under several scenarios. The most likely scenario studied was based on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's projections of sea level height by 2100 and corresponding changes in reef structure. Under those conditions, the average back reef wave heights at the 4 sites would be 2.4 times as high in 2100 as today, over double. The team reports February 28th in Science Advances. That change would be largely due to the decrease in coral reef complexity rather than rising sea levels, the simulations suggest. Coastal communities around the world will likely see similar wave height increases dependent on local reef structures and extent of sea level rise. The findings, the researchers say, shows that conserving reefs is crucial to protecting coastal communities and in a changing climate. I was going to say in a climate change. All right, last snippet. This is from March 2nd. New study, snowpack levels show dramatic decline in western states. Corvallis, Oregon. A new study of long-term snow monitoring sites in the western United States found declines in snowpack at more than 90% of those sites. And 1/3 of the declines were deemed significant. Since 1915, the average snowpack in western states has declined between 15 and 30%, the researchers say, and the amount of water lost from that snowpack reduction is comparable in volume to Lake Mead, the West's largest man-made reservoir. The loss of water storage can have an impact on municipal, industrial, and agricultural usage, as well as fish and other animals. It is a bigger decline than we had expected, said Philip Mote, director of the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute at Oregon State University and lead author on the study. In many lower elevation sites, what used to fall as snow is now rain. Upper elevations have not been affected nearly as much, but most states don't have that much area at 7,000 plus feet. Snowpack levels in most of the western U.S. for 2017-18 thus far are lower than average, a function of continued warming temperatures and the presence of a La Nina event, which typically results in warmer and drier conditions in most southwestern states. I could go on and on. I'm going to just link. You all know where this is. You can just Google Faster Than Expected, or I will link this below and you all can read these articles at your leisure. I did an interview with Dean Walker from livingresilience.net. He has done some work with Carolyn Baker. I did an interview with him yesterday, and I will be posting that interview on the site on my page tonight, as well as this video. So go check it out. It's just a interview with Dean and I will link his website in that video as well, so you can go check out what he's doing. Thank you as always for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. I hope to be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.